Welcome to each one. We're, of course, studying on parenting God's way, and we're in lesson 5. Towards the end of that lesson, preparing our homes for spiritual success. Is there anyone that needs a copy of those questions? Raise your hand and we'll get those brought to you if you don't have that. All right. So last week we focused our time on these points right here, these 6 points. There was a survey done years ago on what makes for strong families, and these are the 6 that were highest on the list: having a spiritual commitment, spending time together, having good family communications, expressing appreciation to each other, able to solve problems in crisis, committed to the family. And picking up where we left off then with question 5, explain the steps that parents can take to help protect their children from the potential dangers of TV, of music, video games, social media, smartphones, tablet use, etc. There's a lot there maybe to unpack, but I thought these things are, for a long time, TV's been around for a while now. And music has, of course, and even in my youth, I guess video games were kind of starting out then. To date myself, Atari was coming out around that time as I was growing up. Things have changed a little bit since Atari, and what was the one before that? Yes, yeah, there you go. That's the one. I remember that one too. I didn't have that. My cousins had that one. But you think about what we grew up, and then social media, right? That wasn't around. And the effects of that on society, on our young people, smartphones, phones. I think the first phone I remember having was when I was preaching in St. Louis, Missouri. And that would have been 98, 99, in those years. That's the first time I think I remember having a cell phone. Of course, we're talking about 20 or so years ago now, and you think about, everybody has a smartphone. So many people have a tablet. I say everybody. It's a general statement, but most people have phones and internet access on those phones and tablets and computers, and I guess I left off computers, but computers. And so what are some thoughts that we can, and points we can help one another with these areas in our homes, with our families? You want to help? Okay, in other words, parent. Yes. We had, that's exactly what we're talking about. We had to be careful, though, that we don't become lazy in our parenting, or maybe too trusting in our parenting, because we know that all these things maybe are not sinful in and of themselves, but most, if not all, present a clear and present enticements and allurements that are associated with these things. So Brother Ray was saying, be careful to know what they're watching, what they're looking at on a TV and computer. So again, we talked about this earlier, that our parenting must be intentional, and it better be to these things, right? Okay. So how can we do that? What are some things we can do to try to stay on top of that? Rhonda? Okay. All right. So comment on the positives of randomly asking. They don't know you're about to if it's random, right? It's not at such and such a time I want to see this. It doesn't give them time. Let me have your phone. Let me. That's good. They may not like it, but it's good for parents to do that, right? Okay, so randomly seeing their phone, if they have a phone, their computer, if they have the computer, to check it out. Gil?
One thing that I've heard that's a good recommendation that we haven't had to do yet, but if there's a computer that the family uses, it's in a big open area where everyone can see, and they know that they can't do anything in private, and anytime we can go see everything they've done. We're smarter than them. They need to know that so that we can see anything you've done. Don't try to hide anything. We're going to be in control of what you look at and what you access.
Okay. I know that when it comes to parenting, every family is not going to be in 100% agreement on how to do certain things. But I think what Gil said is, and I've heard other parents say this, I know other parents do this, and I think it's important. The point he's making is when it comes to something like a computer, have it in a open space of the house where it can easily, visibly be seen and not hidden and private and secluded. That can open the door to a lot of issues, a lot of problems. Okay, there is wisdom in that. A lot of wisdom, I think, in that. Who you pointing to? Okay, Melissa.
It's not just for kids either.
That's right.
Bad practice for adults either.
That's right. So it's not just a kid problem or a kid issue. Things that we're talking about now apply to us as well, apply to adults. That's exactly right. Jason?
But they're saying that, I mean, I was just sitting there thinking, yeah, a lot of these problems are with adult social media, like that's a big adult problem. With your kids, you want to teach them to use the things properly. And so it's not to completely exclude the use of them, although sometimes that should be the case. You just cut them off. No, you don't have access to this. But there's a level of maturity that they need to show to be able to use these things, which, again, oftentimes adults don't even have that level of maturity to be able to use these things. But one thing that I just wanted to touch on, unfortunately, what Gil said is not always true. The parents are not always smarter than the kids. And Damon said it, there was somebody else talking, so I don't know that everybody heard it. Kids know how to delete stuff. Kids nowadays, unfortunately, they know a lot more about these devices than many of their parents, not Gil. Now, in Gil's case, that's very true. Gil will always be smarter than his kids in that situation. But for the rest of us, that might not always be the case. And so in that situation, I would say, seek help. Ask for some help from somebody that might be smarter than you. Set controls to the point that you can on devices, but also limit them because, yeah, you can't be so trusting in your kids that you just let them do whatever, and you just take a quick glance and say, okay, well, everything must be fine.
Right. Great points. Appreciate that. Teresa?
Mean to do it, but he would always be interested in what we were doing, so he'd ask questions and scroll with us and see what we were looking at on Instagram or Facebook, and just be genuinely interested in what we were doing, which also censored what we were looking at. And then we would have the conversations. I mean, we have conversations even as adults about, well, maybe social media isn't you're not looking at bad things, but maybe you are coveting or being envious of the things that you're looking at continuously. So there's other things that go on social media and tablets and smartphones.
We're wasting too much time.
Yeah.
Apparently influencers are really influential. Because they have these wonderful lives where they're making millions of dollars changing their clothes. It ain't gonna happen to normal people. I can't change my clothes and make, $5,000 in a day. It's like,
I don't know. You got some pretty specific outfits. But anyway, I'm not trying to encourage you to be an influencer, though, Damon. Well, not that kind of influencer. Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, kind of along those lines. I remember, Phil Martin's kids were older than ours, and he was always giving us the advice to, you got to join, if they're going to join the platform, you got to join the platform too. And you may not want to, but you got to participate in whatever they're participating in. That way they know that, whatever they're following or liking or whatever, you can see it. And that way you can talk about that kind of stuff. there's a boy I know of who got into a lot of trouble, and it's like those of us who were on Twitter with him, we could see that he was liking stuff that was, in the LGBT type category and all this, warning signs, red flags, but his parents weren't on there with him, so they didn't know.
Yeah. So how'd you word that first part about the platform? What Phil said was what?
Well, just you need to join with them. If they want to be on Instagram, you're on Instagram. If they want to be on Snapchat, you're on Snapchat. And that doesn't necessarily insulate them from all trouble, because I'm sure there's probably still some ways where they can operate in some of these apps that we don't understand. So we gotta educate yourself.
Right. And there's things that we can just say, you're not going to be, I think, on that. You're not going to participate in those things. We got to do our homework and research about these different WhatsApp, Snapchat, whatever, TikTok. Norm A. No, I guess Norm A is not here. Norm P, why don't you go?
In my case, I don't have a smartphone, but my wife does, and I know how to use a smartphone with the various apps that are on them. And the only reason why I keep up with that stuff is pretty much along Bill's point. I need to be smarter than my kids. They are my kids. And so if I'm not going to put it forth an effort to stay up to the technology and challenges that they're going to face, how can I hope to guide them spiritually? So I've got to be on top of all the neat cool things that are going on, all the new programs and games coming out. The various music that's happening is, I listen to some pretty big garbage. That's because once I listen to it, I can make the decision. That's not something you need to be listening to. That's not on your list anymore. You come up with something else to listen to, but not that. Yeah. And being able to go through and properly censor means being able to go through and having the discernment between good and evil, and being able to make that decision requires being in there and knowing how to use all of those things, so that as they grow up and they start to mature, and they can't pull one over them. Yeah, they can learn like that. Kayla's probably the master of racing. She's been racing things since she was 2. From all kinds of various consoles and things that she got her hands on. Most of it was by accident because she was just hitting buttons. But there was no reason that accident would become something that she became deliberately good at. And so the fact that I know how to go into those things and rescue those files is something I taught myself. Now that's handy if I accidentally leak something myself, or my wife needs something and I need to go find something for her. But it also means that if my kids want to try to get away with something, they're not going to, because I've taught myself, look, I'm going to cover the bases. I know how to use this stuff better than you. Just because it's a new thing that's out, you're not going to have advantage on it over me. Now when they get out of the house, it's going to be on them how much more they learn and what they want to do. But while they're there, I need to be the one that is one capable of guiding them. And if I don't know enough, I can't.
So a lot of this, parents have to equip themselves today in the 21st century way. Parents did not have to equip themselves in the 20th century with the things that we have up here. And remember one of the points from the previous week on the chart, communication. And Teresa touched on that to at least some degree with Damon and her sister and the conversations. We got to keep the conversations going, communication open. Jeff, and then I'll come over here to Clarissa.
I was just going to say, do other things. Go outside and throw the football, kick the soccer ball, climb a tree, make cookies, but do things with them and don't let them be getting in their room and get on the smartphone or whatever. Go spend time with them, and especially if you find something that they like that you can participate in. Yeah. I know Colton, it was kind of, for me, it was disc golf. He kind of got into it and got me into it. And so we spent a lot of time doing that, which made it easier. Plus you can talk when you're doing those kind of things and kind of sometimes you can get a feel for things that are going on where you might need to step in and help out or make an attitude adjustment if it's necessary. So that was just give them opportunities to do things with you or other Christians that don't involve all the things that we're looking for.
That's right. Good. Clarissa.
One thing I thought of that's not on this list, but obviously it applies to adults and children too, is books. you can just see your kids reading, and that's a good pastime, but there's so many things that are in books, and I have a child that goes through a book like every 2 days, so it's very hard to like keep her in books, and then you have to make sure the books that she's, you know, wanting to get, you know, are appropriate, and I've found websites that kind of will give you the ratings and what's in this book or, you know, not in this book. So that's just another thing that can seem innocent, but it's just as bad as watching a movie with it, and can lead you down a rabbit hole pretty quickly. So
Sure, definitely. Books, the contents of books. There's plenty of wicked books out there, impure books, and it matters what we read. It matters what then we're thinking upon. So we think about Philippians 4:8. We want to meditate on things that are pure and lovely and holy and good report, praiseworthy, virtuous. Those are the things we want our thoughts and our minds and our children's minds upon. So books. All right, Shirley?
And children that on their phones, they're scrolling through all this stuff, they can accidentally get on something that they don't need on me, I think.
Things can sometimes unintentionally come across the screen, right? Scrolling and pop up, and as Shirley was mentioning about young people scrolling on their phones or something, and there's a lot of dangers and darkness and devices of Satan lurking right around the corner, sometimes not around the corner, just front and center. Jason?
Todd said something that made me think of a very, very important thing for us, everybody within this room, to remember steps that parents can take, and that's help each other. So if you see something on Twitter that some kid is doing, you need to tell the parent. I'm going to tell you, every one of you right now, if you ever see Zoe White or Elise doing something, then you have an obligation to come tell me. We have to help each other. And so if you see something and you know something, then help the parent.
Okay, well said. It's one of the things I said when I made an announcement about a parenting class, that this wasn't to get on or to be discouraging. This was to encourage, to instruct, that we can be a help to each other. And that ties into the point Jason's making, I believe, that we want to help each other. So if you see something with someone else's child, for example, on social media, and maybe they don't know, let them know, because they would want to know, we would want to know, and hopefully everyone here would want to know, to be able to not be in each other's business, but out of genuine concern and love, hey, were you aware of this? And if not, this is what we saw. Sean?
I think it's good to discuss the different policies that different parents have in different regards, but what has to be universal, I think, is that, I don't say we, because I don't have any kids, but people discuss with their children why the rules are what they are. I told you so because I said so. It's a very easy answer, but unfortunately, it's just not very effective. There's going to come a time where they have to have the judgment over what they do with their free time, with their technology. And if it's always just you have a filter on your internet and they don't have a phone, and you're always with them while they're on the computer, and they don't play any video games, if those are the rules and you never explain why, when it comes time where they have to make the judgment for themselves, it is very likely they are going to make the wrong judgment. And very difficult and awkward, uncomfortable conversations is very important. Why can't, telling your children, why can't they have their phones in their rooms with them at night? Or why the computer is in the public area? Or why they don't need to be on their iPad for 4 hours a day? Because I said so I just think that's kind of a lazy answer.
Yeah, it may be true, and it is, because I'm the parent, you're the child, but the instruction that needs to be given, explaining, here's the reasons, here's our reasons, and here's the dangers, and we want to help protect you, and we love you, and all that. So I think that's exactly right, Sean. We need to spend the time with our parenting as to here's why. Go ahead, Stan.
Everybody's touched on this about getting involved with their kids on these particular platforms. But I think the reason that backs that is that if you don't, those things there become the parents. They will lead the kids in a way that maybe you don't want them to go.
That's right.
So that's the reason you have to get involved.
Yes. Yeah. Go back to what I said about we got to be careful not we become lazy parents and let's let them watch TV and let them do the video games and let them have their phones and that's what they interact with instead of us doing the parenting and interacting with our children and being involved in their lives and knowing what's going on and spending that time with them, as Jeff said earlier, doing other things so they're not always doing this stuff, but spending time with them outside, doing sports or whatever it is. Jeff, did you have your hand up again? You were just telling me that. Julie, you have?
When my kids were teens, I looked up the White House one day, and I looked up plastic pants one day, which is what we used to call those things that go over diapers. And both of those led me to porn sites. It took me forever to find out what you call diaper covers now, because I was so frantic over the things I was finding just trying to look up plastic pants.
So honestly, Googling, looking up something that has nothing to do with anything sinful, and yet taking you to sites that are wicked.
Some of these computers, once you turn on where you can speak on the computer, some of these places can hack into your house and turn on some of those things and hear what's going on in your house. And kids, I would never let my kids take a phone to the bathroom or the bedroom with them, ever.
All right. I think that's good. I think that's wise. All right. Other thoughts or comments, Todd?
There's going to be a little bit of evil in practically everything. I know some parents' approach is let's just get rid of the TV, completely. Our approach has been let's watch whatever we're going to watch together, and when that character in the show, it could be a Disney movie, right? And suddenly they've got a guy who's homosexual, right? Our approach is after the show, or maybe right then if we can pause it, we're going to talk about it. And that, I think, is helpful even from a young age where they can hear very clearly from a parent. We can point it out as this is wrong, it's not what God wants. I think that can be better. I mean, I understand the more protective approach, and you introduce that on your own terms, but I've seen some who just don't get the opportunity to talk to their kids before they've been exposed to it at school or from their friends and have already adopted liberal morals before the parents ever get a chance to talk to their kids about it.
All right. Exactly. All right, Sean.
Jason's point about helping one another. As humbly as I can say this, I know everything about the internet and virtually everything about smartphones and computers. So I think that I'm a pretty good guy to come to with that kind of stuff. So
Appreciate the offer. Yep, we all have different maybe talents and expertise, and some have strengths in certain areas such as technology. And these things we're talking about, I know Sean does, and thank you for that offer. And some of us may be taking you and Gil, others like that, up on that. Shirley?
As far as the video games, they might not be bad within themselves, some of them, but the time you let them stay on there could be a problem.
Right.
Let them on there.
So maybe the content of the video games and what it's teaching them, it may not be that. It may be, though, the time that they're wasting and we're allowing them to spend on that. Yeah. So again, there may not be 100% agreement. I know there won't be on when it comes to video games, when it comes to how much time they spend on that. But there needs to be parameters. There needs to be rules, and not just let them watch as much TV as they want. Let them have a TV in their room and a phone in their room and a computer in their room. And again, some parents do that. I know the parents. And I don't agree with those decisions, but and then you can start seeing problems and fruits of that. And so we have to step back and think about how are we going to approach these things that present so many dangers. Sorry?
Have all this stuff when we brought our children up, and I'm glad.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I wish I was bringing my kids up in the 80s. And some of you maybe go back a little further, but when I grew up, it was in the 80s, and a lot of that, you know, we were doing a lot of what Jeff said. We were just outdoors, you know, all the time till dark. Psalm 101, if you'll turn there in your Bibles, please. Psalm 101. And Andy Hall, how you doing? Good. Can you read that for us? Psalm 101, verse 3, and then Jeff Sharp, if you'll read Psalm 119, verse 37. Psalm 101, verse 3, Andy.
I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me.
Okay, so going back to what Melissa said early on, what we're talking about applies to us grown-ups, applies to our children. But here's one of those great passages to think of. And of course, you know, David wasn't talking about computers and TV and social media when he wrote this, but there's application for a godly person to strive to not set anything that's wicked or worthless before our eyes or before our family's eyes. Jeff, in Psalm 119, verse 37.
Turn my eyes from worthless things and give me life through your word.
Okay. So turn my eyes away from looking at worthless things, is how the New King James Version reads, and revive me in your way. Again, what we look at is very influential, isn't it? In a good way or in a negative way. And I think these are some good passages to keep in mind, maybe along with Philippians 4:8, with our topics here. Now, Julie, you touched on this, and let's talk about it just a little bit more because it's so prevalent. The problem of pornography. Nationally representative survey of teens finds 84.4% of males and 57.1% of females have viewed pornography. 62% of kids ages 11 to 13 who have seen pornography reported had been unintentional versus 46% of 16 to 17-year-old. Visit to Pornhub totaled 33.5 billion over the course of 2018, an increase of 5 billion visits over 2017. That equates to a daily average of 92 million visitors, and at the time of this writing, Pornhub's daily visits now exceed 100 million. I was hearing news stories during the lockdowns and pandemics, the porn industry, even more revenue coming in. Addiction to pornography can actually physically decrease the size of the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is responsible for controlling impulses, self-control. Individuals who never view sexually explicit material report higher relationship quality and lower rates of infidelity than those who do. I guess that's not too shocking, right? Some of the resources for this information, and April was helping me with this, by the way, to credit her, defendyoungminds.org, Fight the New Drug, speaking, of course, of pornography.org, enough.org, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Porn Proofing Today's Young Kids by Kristen A. Jensen. What can parents do? Be proactive about warning children of the dangers of pornography. Keep a running conversation and accountability. Have a plan of action for kids if they see pornography. Close eyes, tell a parent, name it as what it is. Distract oneself and train brain in self-control. Utilize parental controls and filters. An example of that, not that it's perfect, but something like Covenant Eyes. Check computers and devices often. Again, kids are very smart. Many times young people are much smarter with technology than us parents. And so we have to equip ourselves and maybe utilize some even here that can help us with those sort of things. The problem, although, with these filters, that children are often able to find ways to get around them if an addiction already exists. So I wanted to touch on that. Julie did, but this is such a prevalent problem in our society, in our world, and in the Lord's church with many, many Christians. Okay? April?
To that, and we hit on it before, but just being so proactive with even, younger children, like Sean was saying, it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation talking to small, like even 9 and 10-year-old children about this, but just to warn them, say, hey, if you see something where someone is dressed inappropriately, you close your eyes and you come tell me right away. It's just like warning them and giving them, examples. This might pop up on the screen, and that's not something we need to, be exposed to, and just, being proactive with that instead of, like them not even knowing that it's an issue is going to help a lot, and then giving them tools to deal with it if they do accidentally see it. Like the statistic said, so many of the younger kids, 60-something% see it unintentionally, and just giving them the tools to know what to do if that happens. And then also when they get older, have a constant running conversation with them about it and accountability. When I was preparing for this lesson, I talked to a parent that we know whose teenage son has really struggled with this, and they've been open about it. And his son, who's a Christian, he came to his dad and said, we need to have accountability every couple days. His son is asking for help with this, because he realizes it's something he struggles with. And so the father I was talking to, he said, that's my job, is to be there, constantly. So it's not happening, and just to, be that resource to be open and constantly checking on it.
And this, if you knew the family, and who she's referring to, is a very strong family, godly family. This young man, you wouldn't think anything about him having a problem with pornography, because spiritually minded, very involved, song leading, getting up, speaking, but yet there's that temptation and debate, and so easily it can get a young person or an older person, and we have to be very proactive, as April was saying. We have to be very intentional, as I said earlier, with our parenting. Jason?
I mentioned this in one of the previous classes, but I had read something actually just this last week about pornography within the church and how it is so rampant within the church. And I have nothing to back this up, but I'm afraid that part of the problem with the issue that we have with pornography, especially with our kids, is within the church, we don't talk about sex enough in general. And it's almost like it's taboo. And we're scared, like, to even have a conversation with members of the church, when this is a very wholesome thing that God designed for a husband and wife. And our kids need to know that. And they need to know that from a young age. And it needs to be okay to talk about that. There's nothing bad about the sexual relationship between a husband and a wife. And so if we're going to try to help explain to these kids, this is bad, we need to start with, well, this is what God intended. And this is okay, and this is good.
Right. Yeah, great points, and well said. Much truth to that. All right. So name some examples, and I appreciate all the great comments and good discussion. I'm going to try to squeeze a little bit more in for the second bell goes, though. Name some examples of some worldly and ungodly influences that may need to be removed from our homes. Paul says, do not be conformed to this world. Romans 12, verse 2, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, by that good and perfect will of God. So 1 John 2, 15 through 17, what does John say there? Do not love what? Do not love the world or the things in the world. And then it says, if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it, but he who does the will of God abides forever. And there's a lot of other scripture we could put up there. These are just three I cited for the question. But Luke 12:15, Jesus, as he's teaching the man, asked him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And he said, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator?" And he said in verse 15 of Luke 12, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." So what are some things maybe you wrote down here for question 6 real quick? Shirley?
Too much of your time.
Okay. Anything that consumes too much of our time? We're told a couple of times very specifically we need to be redeeming the time, make the best use of our time. And there's plenty of things that, again, may not be sinful in and of themselves, but then they can become that just with how much we allow it to consume our times, and we're not putting spiritual things first. We're putting material, physical pleasure, things we find pleasure in that it becomes a waste of our time. All right. Anything else you want to add? Things we might need to get Clarissa.
Well, I mean, just like we've been talking about, if you find out that something has been a stumbling block or whatever, then it may just, instead of just checking on it every day, you may just need to get rid of whatever that social media, whatever it might be. We're just not going to use this anymore. We're not going to have this anymore. You're not going to have this anymore, or whatever. It just needs to be completely removed instead of let me constantly monitor it. Let's just remove it altogether.
Or it's becoming too much of a problem, and we have to get rid of it and cut it off. Kind of reminds me of Mark chapter 9. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Your eye, pluck it out. Your foot, cut it off. Jesus is saying, whatever it takes, something's causing you to sin, it's better to go make a painful, maybe sacrifice, and give up this or that in order to save your soul and not spend eternity in hell. Brenda, did you raise your hand? Okay, just saw a movement, I guess. That was your hand, sorry. Who are you pointing to? Go ahead, Andy.
The society, the times, and everything that we live in, there's so much worldly things around us all the time. I mean, especially get brought into the home. So it may be that we need to bring more spiritual things in the home that it overrides the worldly things.
Yeah. Again, if we're preparing our homes for spiritual success, that God should be the focus, Christ should be the focus, His Word and it being taught should be the focus in our homes. That spiritual mindset and drive and focus should be overriding everything else, and that's going to should give us a major advantage as we deal with all these influences and issues and challenges that we face or our children face in these days and times. But it may be ungodly friends or companions, and if we're parenting, we need to know who their friends are, who they're spending time with. We'll have another lesson that's more focused on that later. Maybe a problem in our home of materialism, focused just on physical, material things, a covetous heart. That's Luke 12:15 and Colossians 3:5. It may be ungodly or wicked music, books, as Clarissa touched on earlier, TV shows, movies. We need to stop watching those. We need to get rid of those things, kind of like the Ephesians did in Acts 19. Those magic books, they gathered them all up and burned them. Sometimes we just need to burn some things, and it's not that we need to go take it somewhere else so someone else can have some things we're getting rid of that are wrong. We need to trash it, burn it, destroy it, so it doesn't influence someone else, not go make money off of it or take it to Goodwill for someone else to have it. Whatever it may be, there's some other things I'm sure we can add to this for sure. Anything else real quick on this question that you want to add? Okay. And then what are some activities that need to be a regular part of family life? Lauren?
A few weeks ago, they were having family dinner. Like, that was always a part of our life when I was growing up. And it was so weird to me to go to other people's houses and they would just get their food and scatter. And that was like a foreign concept to me, because we all sat together and ate and we waited for everyone to finish before we left. And
even what we do now when everyone's home, we still all eat together. I think that's a very important part of learning conversational skills, keeping up with what people in your family are doing, and having an open relationship with everyone.
You are singing, but that's music to my ears, Lord. And I'm sure because of that and how much you know how important that was, you plan to do that, you and Robert plan to do that with your own family, and as you now have conceived. And I think that's so important. And, you know, as you said, you went to other people's homes and that wasn't being done, and how that was a foreign concept. I wish it wasn't, but I think it would, you know, I think that's what is more the case than not, that we're experiencing. So yeah, the family dinner table, someone said prayer. Exactly, that should be a regular part of family life. Reading and studying and discussing the scriptures needs to be a regular part of family life, right? What else? Anything else? How about working on and completing our weekly Bible lessons? And whether that's as a family or making sure that our children are doing that. But one of the advantages, and Todd's touched on this and others, of what we've been going through the Waldron material, we're all doing that, right? On Sunday mornings at least. What about work? Helping with household chores. Don't let your children be lazy and parents do everything. That's good for them. All right, the kids are up, and that's all the time we have. Thank you. So lesson 6, we'll begin that next week. If you don't have it, pick it up, please, and work on that.